Thank you, John. Welcome, everybody. I was very glad to hear John say that I have all the right people hating me. And our last speaker, Michael Matt, talked about an organization known as the Southern Poverty Law Center. I won a case against them. And it was an antitrust suit, and the law center just couldn't handle it. Morris Dees wasn't quite up to it, and we beat them unanimously. And so they left, and the Nows went and got their own law center, and they beat us in the trial court and in the appellate court, and we won in the Supreme Court. So I was a little disappointed because I was called a racketeer. And being from Chicago, that's kind of an honor to be a racketeer. So I consider myself a permanent racketeer, whether they want to call me that or not. I'm supposed to talk today about the 40-year battle. It's been a long battle. It's been a hard battle. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly because there are more important things to talk about. One thing is that there's a little quote from Shakespeare's Hamlet, where Hamlet is in a mess. His father has been murdered by his uncle, and his mother has married the uncle, and his girlfriend Ophelia is going crazy, and she eventually commits suicide, and he kills her father, and it's a mess, and all his friends are going to England. And he says, "The time is out of joint. Oh, cursed plight that I was ever born to set it right." And I think that fits us. The time is certainly out of joint, but blessed plight that we were born to set it right. We are born at this critical time in the history of the world where we have the wherewithal through Mary, through our dedication, through Jesus Christ, through the saints, the martyrs, that we can set it right. And it will be set right. You know, God's still in command no matter what his creatures do. He wins in the end. This movement started long, long ago, probably with Adam and Eve. And when they committed their first sin, we've been sinners ever since. But the movement toward an abortion culture really started with the sexual revolution. In the 1960s, when Griswold, Connecticut, struck down the state laws against contraception. Contraceptives were forbidden. Throughout my youth, you didn't hear much about that sort of thing. 1974, the Alan Guttmacher organization built up a group called the Association for the Study of Abortion. Now, abortion was unthinkable. You remember that? We didn't talk about abortion. Abortion, somebody maybe ran off to some sleazy place in a back alley and had an abortion, but it never crossed your mind that abortion would become the law of the land. Involved in this became the American Civil Liberties Union, the American Medical Association, the American Public Health Association, and Planned Parenthood. They all got into the abortion debate, discussing. And I know at the time I was working in Chicago for the city of Chicago, and on the floor below us in the 185 North Wabash Avenue building was Planned Parenthood. And I used to go down there and read their stuff. There was nothing about abortion. It was contraception and so on. But the man who ran it was an ex-Franciscan friar, which was a little surprising, but I had been an ex-Benedictine monk, so we got along fine, set a little office now and then. And he was running Planned Parenthood. And it didn't seem like a bad thing. We were all confused in those days. Then in 1967, the National Organization for Women, having been in existence only 1 year, adopted abortion program. And a lot of women left. An awful lot of women left the National Organization for Women at that time. Meanwhile, the church is beginning to see what's coming. And Monsignor James McHugh, at the orders of the National Council of Catholic Bishops, instituted the National Right to Life Committee. That's how it started. That was back in '66. In '67, 14 states passed liberalized abortion laws. By 1968, there were abortion laws being passed all over the country. letting up on the time limits, letting up on, and including health of the mother and rape and incest and things of that sort. But it was in the 1970s when it really heated up, and of course, in 1970, 4 states legalized abortion: Hawaii, New York, Alaska, Washington State, and 13 other states allowed abortion more liberally than they had. In 1973, of course, January 22nd, the black letter day, Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton. Cases out of Georgia and Texas. And that was abortion on demand. And if you read Doe v. Bolton, which nobody has ever read except a few of you and me, I've had reporters come to the office and say, I want to interview on the Supreme Court rulings, and I say, have you read them? No. I said, then no interview. Go home and do your homework. It'll be an insult to both of us for you to interview me on something you don't know anything about. In Doe v. Bolton, it makes it very clear in a footnote that abortion is allowed up to and including the day of birth for any reason or no reason, because it says health. And health is as broad as the moon. So that was the beginning then of the abortion binge in this country. And it has been a tremendous loss of human life. Hundreds of thousands of human lives, 580 million human lives, almost unthinkable. What we tried to do, as soon as we read about it, I was working as an account executive for a public relations firm when Roe v. Wade came down, and it was a terrible time of year. Everything was happening. President Johnson died, the war in Vietnam was ending, and the abortion decision was on the back page. But when I read it, I got sick. I got physically ill. Because if you read the full decision, you knew that no baby was safe. And my wife was pregnant at the time. I had 3 little boys, and I thought the Lord was punishing me for having left the monastery. And he was just going to give me a monastic community of boys. And so I was praying for a girl like mad, but my wife was pregnant with Catherine when the Roe v. Wade came down, and it put me into shock. I couldn't believe it. So I started trying to find out everything I could about abortion. I read every book I could get hold of. We did have the Illinois Right to Life Committee office, and I would go there every noon, skip lunch, and read. And finally, my boss called me in, and he said, Joe, you're not as interested in your accounts as you were. Well, to Libya cheese, Shakespeare fishing tackle, these things didn't seem so important when our country was on the downward trend in such an enormous way. And so he said, I suggest we keep you on here, on salary, half salary, so you can have your insurance, so when your baby is born, it'll all be paid for. But I suggest that you go full-time fighting abortion. So that came from Paul Fulmer, a Notre Dame buddy of mine, and I'm glad he did it. It was 40-some years ago, and I've never regretted a minute of it. Well, I got active. We didn't know what to do. It was tough. You know, what do you do? How do you fight abortion? So we just started finding out where the abortion clinics were, and a group of us got together and went to the clinics at the time the women were coming, and we talked to them. And we could stand there and talk to these women, and we talked a lot of women out of having abortions into going ahead and having their babies. We would go into the clinics in those days and sit down. I'd take the fetal models and pass it around, stuff their magazines with our pro-life literature. There weren't any laws in those days. The abortionists didn't know what to do with us. So we had our pickets, our protests, we had our prayer vigils. We started something which is now 40 days, and we just did it for 2 days, but we sat out there through the night and had a little camper there so we could get some water and eat a little breakfast and so on, and we would stay round the clock at the abortion clinics, and they hated that, but there weren't any laws against it. We started using the graphic signs, the great big ugly pictures, And we showed them all around the city and stood on the corners, and people didn't like us, and they called us names and made gestures, you know, to go to heaven, and things of that sort. And it became, we had to start sort of from scratch because there wasn't an organized activist. There was lots of literature. Jack Wilkie had done a beautiful job with his slide program. We all used it. It showed the development of the babies all through from beginning to end. And then there were the pictures of abortion, first, second, and third trimester, which was made up by the court. We don't live in trimesters. You know, what trimester are you in right now? Are you sure? I'm in my fourth trimester right now. But we had to go out and do it, and it was successful. We were reaching women. And I would meet with the press because I had been a journalism major at the University of Notre Dame, and I taught journalism for a while at Notre Dame, and I knew that it was very important that you get into the media. The media are liberal. They're hostile to us, but you've got to use them. You have to use them. So I have always said there's no such thing as bad press. There's either press or no press. If it's bad press, good. You can counter it. You can write a response. You can just take it, let people think what they want, build up a reputation, create an image. But we went to the media, and I know they were running abortion ads. The Chicago Sun-Times had a whole page of abortion ads. There were so many abortion clinics and mills in Chicago. So I found out that the two men who were the head of the ad department on the Sun-Times were Catholics. I don't know just how I found that out, but I had spies all over the place. And so I invited them out to an Italian restaurant. And when they had their lasagna and spaghetti and so on, I pulled out the graphic pictures, which were pretty bad. I threw them right in the middle of the table. I wasn't eating anything at the time. And they practically choked, and I said, this is what you are advertising every day in your newspaper. You are advertising this. You pretend to be Roman Catholics. You want to go to heaven, and you're selling abortion. Do something for us. Get rid of those ads or give us an ad. So 2 weeks later, there appeared our ad. And you know, abortion is 8 letters. Baby is 4. So our baby stood out right in the middle of the page of ads. And we told the whole history of the development of the child from conception till natural birth, fingernails, fingerprints, heartbeat, and everything, because we could change our ad every day. And we were giving the message right in the middle of the abortion ads. Besides that, we had 3 phone numbers that the young women could call. They were looking for abortion, they saw baby, and the phones lit up. So we tried things like that to get our message out. We often would court the reporters and the editors. I had meetings with the editorial boards, and the buses that ran abortion ads, we got them to take them down because I said, here's the ad we want to put up, and it was a graphic picture, and of course they wouldn't accept it. I said, then you have to take theirs down, and they took all their ads down. And wherever they had left them up in some of the outlying districts, we went out with spray paint and sprayed out the number. Now this gave us a reputation that we were tough and mean and so on. And we were simply entrepreneurs. We were fighting death. We were fighting murder of children. And so some of the things we did were not exactly totally within the law. For instance, we would have graffiti battles, but usually on building sites where they just had up the plywood borders anyway, and they were going to tear those down. We would have great big letters that we would hook over the top, and we would say, abortion kills babies, abortion murders women, all the way down the block. And then the abortionists would come along with their little pencil and try to scratch it out. So in time, we got this image. And it finally led to Now versus Scheidler, which was a 28-year lawsuit that still isn't finished because they won't give us our damages. We won. We won in the Supreme Court. We lost first when we went to the court and asked whether or not racketeering charges could be made against a social movement. And the Supreme Court said yes. So then we went back to trial, and we lost in the trial. And we lost before the Supreme Court, or we won before the Supreme Court, but then was sent back to the appellate court for retrial. I never heard of anything like that. So we went right back and got cert again from the Supreme Court, and we won unanimously. So now we're trying to get a settlement. But as I say, the time is out of joint, but we are called to this time. And we have to remember that it's our faith that makes us what we are. You are what you eat. Agere sequitur esse. Your actions will flow from what you are, what you believe. And so we believe that our faith has to be tremendously strong. Jesus was always looking for faith. Remember the centurion who came up to him and said, don't even come under my roof. And we use that beautiful Mass where we say, Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter under my roof, but only say the word and my soul will be healed. And that's basically what the centurion said. Don't even come, just your power. And his servant was healed. The woman who had the flow of blood, who just touched his garment, and he felt power go out of him. And he asked Peter, who do people say I am? You're the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus said that man had not told him this. It was his faith. It came from inside. The weak faith gets you nowhere. You know, we had that beautiful prayer at Compline. Fratres sobri estote et vigilate, quia adversarius vester diabolus, tam com leo rugiens, circuit quorumquem deverit, cui resistite fortes infite. Brethren, be sober and watch. For your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, goes about seeking whom he may devour, whom resist ye fortes infide. Strong in faith. Beautiful prayer. Prayer of St. Peter. And so that's the kind of faith that God expects of us. And that's the kind of faith that's here today. That's the kind of faith that brings you here to listen to boring talks and things and to do all of these beautiful things. We have among us very weak people. And yet God chooses the weak. St. Paul makes it very clear that we're not the great noble souls. We're not those powerful people. We're the ordinary people that Jesus wants to use, and that he did use. He didn't choose his apostles from the greats. They were fishermen and people who knew what it was to make a living, to suffer, to work, to toil. In the process of being pro-life, of being Christians, of being practicing Catholics, you will, as our last speaker pointed out so clearly, suffer. You will be wounded. Everybody in this room has been wounded for his belief. I'd say his and her belief, but I don't believe in that kind of corrective way, you know. But I just don't go for that. He means he and she to me. so politically correct to me is sort of wimpy. But anyway, we will be wounded, every one of us. And yet, how was our Lord identified? Remember on the road to Emmaus, he was talking to them, and they were stopping, and he pretended to go on. And they said, stay with us a while, and he talked to them. I think it's when they said they knew him in the breaking of the bread. I can't help but think it's when he broke the bread they saw the wounds. Maybe my interpretation, but there's something about that then they knew it was the Christ. And when he went back and St. Thomas had not been there, and he came a week later, what did Thomas say? He had said he wouldn't believe unless he put his finger in the wounds. When Christ was there, Thomas was probably embarrassed. But Jesus went through this in order for us to believe. Put your finger in the nail prints and your hand in my side and believe. So we will be wounded. You'll suffer. And I feel sort of bad when I'm not being either arrested or sued or somebody. The other night, my wife and I heard a big crash, and I thought, oh, geez, something's happened in the dining room. One of the shelves was overloaded. And I went down. It was kind of cool in the house, and I looked around. I didn't see anything, so we went back to bed. Well, the next morning, the house was freezing. So I went out to get the paper, and there was glass all over the porch on both sides, dining room and living room. And so I went inside, and sure enough, two great big concrete slabs had been thrown through our windows. And attached to one of them was a note in an envelope. It was in a sack. And it had some bad words on it, but it said basically, I've had an abortion, and you're not going to take my Queen Anne's lace away from me. Now, I had no idea what Queen Anne's lace meant, but I thought, gee, broken windows, that's newsworthy, so I called the press. And they came down and took pictures, and it's not very exciting to see a broken window, but we got on the page a picture in the paper and a story, and then it went nationwide, and we used it for raising funds. And, you know, it's good to be attacked. I'm sorry I didn't think of it myself. But that night, the detectives came. We became very popular. The police were there and the detectives, and so the detective read the note, and he said, Queen Anne's lace, and he had the wherewithal to pull out his iPhone and look it up. Queen Anne's lace is that sort of an alley plant, you see. It's a flat, white, tiny little buds, and it's used as an abortifacient contraceptive. And I'd never known that, but it's one of the old home remedies they used to have. And that's what she meant. You are not going to take away our abortion rights. So that was good to have that clarified. We have fought hard through this time, all of you have, and I, of course, do my work in the States, but fortunately I've been able to speak in every province of Canada. Started out in Halifax, Nova Scotia, went across the country, and I was a good friend of Jim Hughes from Toronto, and came up and spoke there and spoke at St. Catherine's. And I remember one time at St. Catherine's I was speaking, and the students, the younger students were fine, but the older students started shouting while I was talking. And so I said, somebody here is not taking a good look at who's teaching. And I had to walk off the stage. I hate to say that, but I couldn't be heard. And so it was funny because I had a whole lot of more talks to give in other schools, in Christian schools and so on. And I was treated royally and given sweatshirts and all kind of things because I had been thrown off the stage at St. Catherine's High School, a Catholic school there. And I met with the bishop. I met with the bishop before I left. And he was just tremendously depressed. For one thing, he had lost two brothers who were also priests before, and he was worried about the condition of the church in Canada, what was happening. And I could sympathize with him because we have had much the same problem down in the States, where our issue is just sort of under the rug. There are good people around, but it's not the main issue. You don't hear about it. The people don't know. They really don't know how bad it is. They don't know anything about the evils of contraception. I've talked to priests who say it never came up in their whole seminary career. Abortion at the rate of 4,000 a day in our country, and it's not talked about. And so we have to do it. It's been given to us, the laity and the good priests and nuns and that are left that we can find to carry this message out there, because it's the most important message that I think it's a matter of life and death. What is the universe about? Why did God create all this? He created it for us, for people. That was his great creation, the creation of man, in the image and likeness of Almighty God. You know, there is so much being found out today. I was watching PBS the other day, and they had a special on nanotechnology. You know, we expand out into the universe, and it's marvelous. The planets and the quasars and the black holes and all these funny things we don't know anything about. But going in, the beauty of the cell, of the atom, the fantastic things that are coming when they remove the space, and you can take a piano and make it down to the size of a matchbox and ship it. It still weighs the same, but that's what they're talking about. And it's hard to believe, but that's the direction we're going in nanotechnology, and they're able now to take a camera with a motion picture, lights and so on, make it the size of a capsule, and you swallow it. It goes through your entire system and photographs every second, so they can find out anything that's wrong with you. And so all these things are coming, and they're fantastic, but they're all about man. They're about the salvation of our soul. We're here for just a little while. When you get as old as I am, and all your friends are dying, and you still feel young, but you're old. And we don't last very long. The time goes so fast. I had my birthday day before yesterday. My birthday, I was on the Vigil of the Blessed Mother, and my sister's on the Feast of the Blessed Mother's birthday. And so we always have a big Blessed Mother event, and because it's her birthday too. We share a birthday with Our Lady. And I was in Australia one time, and it was actually the 7th of September back here, but it was the 8th there. So it was my birthday on the Blessed Mother's birthday, and I almost wanted to stay in Australia, so I'd have my birthdays there. We'll be wounded. We'll spend a lot of time arguing, trying to convince, discussing. I'm writing a book now called Racketeer for Life. I hope I live long enough to finish it. It's 40 years of what we've done, and it is simply a review of some poor guy for somehow stumbled into this mission, which I wouldn't give up for the world. I want to die with my boots on, as they say, that fight to the end. We're having a lot of victories. There are 75, I think, laws passed since the 1st of January in the United States alone, curtailing some abortions. We have 7 states now that have only one abortion facility, and some of those are just on the last legs. Used to be on Michigan Avenue, we could go down, there were like 8 or 9 abortion clinics. There's only 1 now. And we still have our crisis pregnancy center. So we are making progress, and I see it a lot when we go out. We have what we call Face the Truth Week. It's 10 days, actually, but we go out to 3 sites a day. We stay for an hour and a half, and we go to the busiest intersections we can find around Chicago, in the suburbs, up into Wisconsin, over to Indiana, and we carry these signs. It's very well organized. We wear a red shirt that says pro-life, and we hold the signs 30 feet apart, all the way down the highway on all 4 sides so that the cars see it. Face the truth. We start out with the fetal development. We end up with the abortion methods in each trimester. And then we end at the corner with a picture of Jesus holding a baby in his hands, weeping. Many of you have seen it, I'm sure. And then we have an American flag, because I like to combine church and state every chance I get. One year we went out at Christmas, and we sang Christmas carols at the ACLU and the National Abortion Federation at the NOW headquarters, and I would always look for the mailbox, because that's federal property, and I would set the nativity set on top of the mailbox so that we were, again, combining church and state, but we would sing Christmas carols and bring a little cheer into their dull lives, and hopefully a little religion. The people are changing. The attitude used to be, when we'd go out there, it was like 3 to 1, people throwing stuff at us. We've had knives thrown at us, rocks, paint. I got all blacked up one day. Somebody threw a bucket of paint in my face. And we've had the bird and foul language. And now it's like 3 to 1 the other way. Thumbs up, keep up the good work. God bless you, wish I had your guts, things of that sort. And we go to, like I say, the busiest areas that we can find. And I remember one day, just to show you how quickly things can happen, a man came driving up in a flatbed truck. And on the back of it, he had an old beat-up Cadillac. And he was screaming at me every dirty word you could think of, just screaming and yelling. And I said, "Is that a Cadillac 99 DeVille?" And he said, "Yeah, how'd you know?" And I thought I got one. But I said, "Mine's in a lot better condition than that." And he said, "Oh, we're going to fix this up. This will be like a new car when we're done with it." And the light changed, and he drove on. But you can see in 30 seconds, we changed a guy at least to be civil. And that's what you have to do. You find something. I remember one time we have a gal, Kathy, meeting, just fantastic. She saved more babies than I think you could count. And she'd been at this for years. She has a way about her. She's a flaming redhead. She must be 100, but she looks like she's about 25. She does something to her hair and her skin. Anyway, Kathy was coming down the street, and there was a girl, a young woman, who had been screaming at us up at Northwestern University in Evanston. And she'd been screaming and yelling and came down, and she was fighting, and there were 4 or 5 pro-lifers around, and that's not ever a good idea. And I saw Kathy coming. I thought, "Oh, Kathy, please get into this." So Kathy walked right up to her, and she said, "You've got to be Irish." And the girl, "I'm not Irish." "You've got to have some Irish blood." "Well, maybe a little." She said, "Your hair, that white skin, you know," so on. She got talking. Within 3 or 4 minutes, they're discussing the issue. The girl is listening. Her whole demeanor changed. Her face changed. Her attitude. And so finally, she said, "Well, maybe you've got a point. Give me some literature." So Kathy always carries a pocket full of literature and gave it to her. And then the girl, of course, had to give Kathy something, a pack of condoms. So Kathy gave her literature for exchange. I don't know. But it was one of those things. It takes a personality. It takes humility. You're going to be called things. You're going to be spit on. I don't know how many times I've been spit on. I get used to it. It's sort of, in the cold, it's kind of nice. It's warm, you know, and it feels kind of good. But we take that because Christ took it. Christ was spit on. Christ was beaten, maligned, and crucified, and died. And as Matt was saying before, we may be facing martyrdom, a form of martyrdom. Down in the States, as you know, we have our Obamacare, which is going to make us pay for contraceptives, which are abortifacients, Plan B, and so on. They're taking $1 out of some kind of a surplus for abortion specifically. They're spitting in our face. We're going to have to decide what to do. Can we go along with a government that uses our money for abortion directly? It's always been doing it indirectly and giving money to Planned Parenthood. But we have a form of martyrdom. What are you going to do? Drop your insurance? Face catastrophic bills if you get sick? Have to spend time in the hospital? Bankrupt your family? These are hard decisions that have to be made now. We are living in a society that is pagan, that is godless, that is without any real hope. You live for the moment. Well, the moment's gone. Starting this speech is as much history as Abraham Lincoln's assassination. It's history. The last talk is history. And the future is unknown. So we just have this moment. And this is where we decide what we're going to do and what we're going to be. We're living in a tough time. And I sympathize with everybody because we all have our own crosses. I could speak to each person here. And if I talked long enough, I'd find out what your cross is. And it's a heavy cross. And sometimes it's almost unbearable. I have a cross which is stupid, but I sold something that was extremely valuable for nothing. And it bugs me that I was so dumb that I was taken, and I can't get it out of my mind. And my doctor says, you're obsessing, which I probably am. But anyway, the important thing is that we stay close to Christ, stay close to our Blessed Mother. Stay there. They are there. They are there for us. They are more there than we are. I mean, they're more there than the person you're sitting next to. They are so close to us. And we have to keep that in mind. Jesus, Mary, the saints, our patron, our guardian angel. How often do we refer to the real presence of a guardian angel. It's true. These are true things that the media and the secularists and our liberal politicians have no idea of. They think we're nuts, and we're right, and they're wrong, and they'll find out someday. That's the thing that scares me. What all these people are going to find out. Why can't they find it out now? Well, that's up to us. It's up to us. And I started with Shakespeare's little thing about the time is out of joint, oh cursed plight, that ever I was born to set it right, blessed plight for us. And I like to think in Richard the Fifth. I always forget which guy, but it's the guy that went out and fought on St. Crispin's Day. Remember at the Battle of Avignon? And he was, I get it all mixed up a little bit, but here's what he says, and I'd like to apply this to us. He says, from this day to the ending of the world, we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he who sheds his blood with me today shall be my brother. And gentlemen now abed in England, who were not here, will think themselves accursed and hold their manhood cheap when any speaks who fought with us upon St. Crispin's Day. And I like to think that for us, this is our St. Crispin's Day. And we are a band of brothers through blood, through the blood of Christ, maybe through our own blood. So God bless you and welcome to St. Crispin's Day.
The Blessed Virgin gave us a message how to have world peace, that only she can help us. But perhaps we don't get enough perspective. We say, well, nothing dramatic has happened. And it's because our commentators, our newspapers, our editor writers, the people that we really pay attention to, the people that speak on television, in the mainstream press and so forth, people who are under the pay of the enemy often, have yet to point out to us that since we have despised Our Lady's message as the human family, we've despised it, there have been 1,686,570,000 violent deaths as a direct result of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima. That is, again, 1 billion. That is 1 with 9 zeros after it, plus another 686 million people who have died violently for the one simple reason that we've ignored Our Lady of Fatima. We could point out, perhaps another time, that if this is not enough perspective to give us that in these 95 years of ignoring Our Lady of Fatima, we have paid a tremendous price. But as bad as that is, that price will be doubled or tripled in the next couple of years if we ignore her much longer. Just a few months ago, the world's population passed 7 billion people. 7 billion people. Scripture tells us, and other prophecies tell us, that 1/3 to 2/3 of the entire population of mankind will be wiped out in this war to come. I don't know what it takes to wake us up. Maybe we have to find it on NBC or CBS or some commentator in the New York Times before we finally take this seriously. And maybe we say to ourselves, we take it seriously, but I think we don't take it seriously enough. We have many priorities, Sometimes I wonder how I get through my day between what I'm supposed to do today, between getting up and doing my reading, doing my other work, talking to people that God wants me to talk to and so forth. And we only all have 24 hours a day. And I'm sure that my life is not as busy as the bishops and the Pope. But we must make this priority number one. There is nothing more serious, nothing more important, nothing more urgent than Our Lady's message at Fatima. And this is something that I don't know how to say. I remember getting a letter from an older bishop many years ago. I think he was in Ottawa. And he said to me basically in his letter, Father Gruner, if you would not raise your voice so much, if you would not yell at us, we might start paying attention to you. And I wrote back to him and I said, I appreciate very much your interest and your concern and your advice. Now, if you can tell me how I can do that any better than what I'm doing and get the attention, I'd be very happy to do it. I hate yelling at people. I hate raising my voice, and I hate trying to draw attention to myself. But there's no other way around on this message. If there's something more important, and certainly yesterday we were in this March for Life here in Rome, and the number of people that are killed by abortion since about 1975, by the statistics we looked up, is about 1,300,000 people. And by war, there's another 78 million people. And then by government murder, not only in Russia and China, but other parts of the world, 238 million people. These are catastrophic, and they lead us to think that we are, as Pope Pius X, St. Pius X said, that we are in the days just before the coming of the Antichrist. These things that are happening to us, which Pope Benedict, when he was Cardinal Ratzinger, said, that refer to this Fatima message is found in sacred scripture, that we are living the times of the apocalypse. And although we can be distracted with everything from daily newspapers to new movies or whatever else it is that entertains us, these things are happening around us, and they're happening every day. And they're happening in such a way that how can we deny that we're living in, if it's not the apocalypse, if it is not the time coming before the Antichrist, it is the best, shall we say, preview or event which the world has never seen before. Just looking at the Catholic Church, for example, the only other time in church history that comes close to this time is the Arian crisis, when 90% of the bishops were Arian. And there was only about 3 or 4 bishops who actually stood up. And the greatest of them all, St. Athanasius, was actually excommunicated by the Pope in 357 AD. Now, he wasn't really excommunicated because, as the Church has always recognized, as St. Thomas points out, that law is not something that just the legislator says. Law is the ordination of reason. It is for the common good. And as the Church law to this day points out, that no one can be punished if he doesn't commit a crime. So, because Athanasius was standing up for the faith, because he was defending the faith, which was his duty to do, he could not be punished even if the Pope pronounced a sentence of excommunication. In fact, Liberius regretted his action, but Liberius is the first Pope not to be canonized from the time of St. Peter to the year 357. It's well for us to remember then that we need not be afraid of the judgments of men if we are on the right side of God. It's a principle that we need to keep in mind. We also have to understand that prophecy is a function in the Church. It's a function that will never go away. It's a function that must be respected, just as the apostolic offices must be respected. As St. Paul tells us in Ephesians, the Church is built upon the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, not just the apostles. The role of prophecy is essential. Scripture tells us that we must not extinguish the Spirit. We must not despise prophecy, but we must test all things and hold fast that which is good. So that is why I've promoted the message of Fatima, not only because it's unique among all the messages, but of course it's been approved by the Church. As Father Joseph St. Marie pointed out here in Rome, he's the one who wrote the speech for the Pope in 1982 when he went to Fatima. Father Joseph St. Marie points out that it is the role of the hierarchy to judge, to test whether the prophet speaks the truth. But once the hierarchy recognizes that the message comes from God, then the Pope himself and the bishops are bound to obey not the prophet, but God who speaks through the prophet to them. That obligation is primordial. That is not for us to say, I'm telling the Pope what to do. No, but Our Lady of Fatima is telling him what to do. All I do is explain what it means. I answer the objections of theologians or others who haven't had the time to think about it. So when we get back to 1917, Our Lady comes. She comes and gives a message to show mankind the way to peace. She was asked, she was insisted that she come. She comes and she explains. And then for the next 95 years, we basically ignore her. So our Lord himself, in 1931, explained to the Pope and the bishops something, a lesson from history. He said, make it known to my ministers, given they follow the example of the King of France, in delaying the execution of my command, like the King of France, they will follow him into misfortune. What is that example he's talking about, the King of France? On the 17th of June, to the very day, the 17th of June, 1689, our Lord spoke to St. Margaret Mary and told her to tell the King of France to consecrate France to the Sacred Heart. Now the kings of France, there were 3 of them from that day, all ignored St. Margaret Mary's prophecy and our Lord's command through St. Margaret Mary. Even during her lifetime, St. Margaret Mary was known as a saint. She was well hidden, but her reputation for sanctity was well known among her contemporaries. And so, for them to ignore this, they paid with their lives. On the 17th of June, 1789, that's 100 years later to the day, the King of France was stripped of his authority by the Third Estate. 3 weeks later, the French Revolution, the storming of the Bastille. On the 20th or 21st of January, 1994, his head was cut off by the soldiers of the Revolution. And our Lord makes reference to this and says, make it known to my ministers, given they follow the example of the King of France, in delaying the execution of my command, like him, they will follow him into misfortune. Up until now, basically, the popes and the bishops around him have ignored, have delayed, have had one excuse after another. I think I've heard them all. And as we've had proven at these conferences before, none of those excuses really hold water. There is really no excuse for not doing it. However, that is not their choice up to now. And so we have a choice here. Of course, none of us are the Pope. None of us can command the Pope. Only he has the authority to command in the church himself or others, all the rest of the church. But we are not without resources. We will talk about this in another conference. But it's not just for the Pope. As the Pope himself, speaking at Fatima 2 years ago, said, what is foretold in the secret is the passion of the church. And yes, there's a persecution of the Pope, but the Pope is within the church. And so it's not just the Pope that suffers the passion coming up, but it is the church also.
Our Lady makes miracles happen all the time, and the Pope, I think if it's up to Our Lady, he's going to view this DVD and see what we have to say and see the trouble we're in. Governments, social societies, and sadly even many parish priests and diocesan bishops, even some Vatican officials, are not responding seriously and properly to these diabolical threats to our lives and souls that we face today. Holy Father, your flock is desperate, vulnerable, and confused amidst the catastrophic dangers their lives and souls are in. We are deeply concerned for the future of our children, and most important, for the welfare of their souls. The whole world is despondent and unified in one anguished cry. What hope have we? Holy Father, you hold that hope. That solution is in the palm of your hand. Only you can save your flock and the world. And that is by obedience to the holy request of the Mother of God herself, Our Lady of Fatima, who said of herself, "Only I can help you." All she asks is for you, Holy Father, together with all the Catholic bishops of the world, at the same time to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. A mere 5-minute prayer. Holy Father, you need not worry about any repercussions or threats that we all hear about today are being hurled at him. Have confidence, Holy Father. Have confidence in Our Lady's promise. Heaven does not make mistakes. God created the miracle of the Son and fulfilled prophecies made at Fatima for you, Holy Father, so you would believe and do as Our Lady of Fatima requests. Trust in the loving guidance that Our Lady of Fatima gives you. Trust in her maternal promise of protection, as you yourself have nurtured your flock to do. Our Lady requested the consecration of Russia, not the world. She was specific, and Our Lady does not mince words. Please, Holy Father, take Our Lady's words seriously and literally. We cannot change a formula prepared in heaven by God himself, which he sent you through his Holy Mother. Holy Father, when you baptize a baby called John Paul, you don't say, "I baptize all the babies in the world." It would not be valid. Holy Father, when you consecrate a new church, Our Lady of Fatima Church, you don't just say, "I consecrate the churches in the world." It would not be valid. Without mentioning John Paul by name, you would not have effected that baptismal consecration. You would not have set aside that specific baby, John Paul, for God. Without mentioning Our Lady of Fatima Cathedral by name, you would not have effected that consecration. You would not have set aside that specific cathedral for God. Neither, and I must emphasize this, neither can you effect the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary if you do not mention Russia by name. Consecrating all the countries in the world, again, does not set aside Russia for God. The consecration would be invalid, and it does not and it will not have the promised effect. Holy Father, you better than I know this. You are our shepherd. We look to you for guidance and protection against the diabolical forces that prey after our souls on a daily basis. And so we are confused as to why you have not done the consecration of Russia according to the formula Our Lady requested and which God himself commanded. Holy Father, time has run out. Our Lady offered us the only solution, but only through you. Every day of delay in making this consecration, many, many more souls and lives are lost. Today, even thousands upon thousands of souls are already being persecuted, tortured, imprisoned, murdered for their faith. Please do not delay any longer. Please protect your flock. Please consecrate Russia now before it is too late for us. And even for yourself, as the vision of the third secret foretells. Holy Father, we pray for you daily. Save us, save our children. Save yourself from the horrible chastisements prophesied by Jesus and Mary if you do not hasten to fulfill Our Lady of Fatima's request now. Holy Father, now is the time to show Our Lady of Fatima your trust in her and your obedience to her command.
Our Lady said to Sister Lucia of Fatima, "I promise to assist at the hour of death with all the graces necessary for salvation. All those who on the first Saturday of 5 consecutive months go to confession, receive Holy Communion, recite 5 decades of the Rosary, and keep me company for 15 minutes while meditating on the mysteries of the Rosary, with the intention of making reparation to me. Pray the Rosary every day to obtain peace for the world."